Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. It's time to go through a topic that's been around the last few weeks, basically because the next update is going to be pretty focused on aviation, or at least it seems to be, because of the Fox 3 stuff. The real interesting thing to me is how people are going to be hyped for the Fox 3 stuff once it comes in, because it's been talked about so much, maybe it's kind of got a little bit boring after a while. But the idea is, with this new mechanic being spread to more nations instead of America, what you're going to have is you're going to have a complete kind of overload with a bunch of stuff going on. Now, if you know, in Realistic, it used to be a smaller number of people that used to be in each of the games. Then they increased it to 16 versus 16, but also at the same time, what they did is they gave, especially at top tier, a lot of vehicles more and more missiles to be able to deal with. This led to a lot of people having issues with sensory overload and also not being able to react to everything that's around because you have limited resources. If you have a bunch of people running around with IR missiles, semi-active missiles, and active missiles, there's only so many countermeasures you have, and there's only so many vehicles that you can notch, or you can, move away from or defend against until somebody else hits you out of the sky. And that has been the problem with high tier for a lot of people for a long time. The fact that in a smaller scenario, in a 1v1 or a 1v2 scenario, you are able to outplay people, but in a 16 versus 16 or an 8 versus 8 or however it is, what ends up happening is a snowball effect where whoever gets the first initial kills means that they can use that advantage to be able to take over the rest of the team. And it happens a decent amount. It's happened for a long time. This can actually lead to people feeling like they don't have an impact on the game, and instead seeing a bunch of people just kind of get annihilated isn't really great. It also leads to a bees around a honeypot mentality, which means that everybody just goes to the center of the map and fights in a very small area. This could be an issue with map design, but mainly it's just down to how people play nowadays. It's been this way for many years, and I wish it would change. I wish, tactics was something that existed, but unfortunately, over and over and over again, especially at the top tier of the game, they keep giving people access to new mechanics, which make it even easier to play. What made this even more ridiculous is the IRCCMs on the good old IR missiles. This basically meant that a lot of missiles were easy to fire and hard to dodge. So you have to use a metric ton of countermeasures to be able to get rid of them, or what you have to do is you have to pre-fire your countermeasures and hope to stop them. The other thing you also had is the shorter kind of charge rate for the missiles as well. That kind of made them much harder to also dodge too. So you have all of these different factors which are seen as more realistic, which have made the gameplay seen as worse. And this has led to a lot of conversations over the last year or so, basically since the change was made, to reduce the team size again, back down to a lower amount. And then, of course, you're going to have the different discussions around it. What is better? What is worse? Obviously, Gaijin have put out a few statements about this too. And at least when it comes to my thoughts, they're pretty simple. We already have mechanics in the game to use, which can actually do what people want, but also not affect the standard matchmaking. In Ground, they added a feature where you are able to play ground forces at the top tier of the game, and if you want access to night battles, you can turn them on. And if you don't want access to them, which seems to be the vast majority, you can turn them off. If you turn on night battles, what happens is for the first part of the matchmaking, so like the first minute of matchmaking, it will try and preferentially put you into a night battle. So therefore you can get the prizes for it, and also you can play that mode if you want to. Now this is limited to the top tier of the game because it was so viscerally hated in the other areas. But at the same time, it means that it is available if you want to play it. And if you don't want to play it, you can just turn it off, and it's gone forever. You never have to see it again. Why don't they just do this for aviation? Why don't they just implement a switch where if it's off, you play 16 versus 16 as standard, and, everybody is able to do the standard matchmaking that's here, and then if you turn it on, you can have smaller matches. I think in general, that would fix the issue, right? Because it would mean that if people wanted the smaller matches, they could click on the button, and therefore they'll get the smaller matches that they want, or at least they'll see how many other people are queuing up for it. And then also, if they don't get the match after a minute or whatever it is, then they go into the 16 versus 16s. So it doesn't screw up the matchmaking. It doesn't mean that you have separate game modes based on these things, which means that you would split the player base and then it would just be a bit of a mess. We've talked about the issue with splitting player bases between game modes before. It doesn't work very well. But in this case, you could give a preferential to people to make their own decision. And I think that's what we should have in War Thunder. We should have a standard, and then you should have options on top of it where you are allowed to tailor your experience to yourself. Now, they do this with the map rotation, with the likes, the dislikes, and the ban. Probably should add some more likes or dislikes, or maybe an extra ban nowadays, because there's so many maps. But that's there. Then also, as I said, at top tier ground, you have that too. So why not have it at top tier air for this issue? There's no reason to not add this in, because the only issue it would cause is if not enough people queue up for the second option, then you can just make the other one the default option and just go ahead with it, and then maybe test something else or try something else, depending on team size. The only qualifier I would have with this is the squadrons. Now this is something that's been in the game since the start, and I don't know why, and it's very annoying. It's basically the fact that aerialistic, and I believe the other game modes might also do this, it does not match squads versus squads. So if you have a 4 stack of squads, or if you have even 2 sets of 4 people who are queuing up for the same side, you cannot... when it matchmakes, it doesn't search for a matchmaking where it will put these squads versus the squads. So you'll have in aerialistic these times where you'll have one side which has a bunch of squadrons on it, and the other side which has 0. So therefore the communication and also the kind of competitiveness can go out the window at that point. Because sometimes the squads, they have obviously better communication, therefore it's easier to go through. Then also they might be fail platooning, so there's all that stuff. But, the main thing is it gives people an option to be able to kind of screw over the enemy by just the way that they set up. So for me personally, I think that should be fixed. I think honestly that should be something that's looked at. So I would add in the new matchmaking rules of just having the simple switch, but also at the same time, I would make it so it matches squads versus squads. So therefore, people can't abuse the air system where they can just squad up with 3 other people and just dominate the battle, especially when there's lower numbers on each of the teams. Because right now, whenever you see a lot of these profiles, which are 85, 90% win rates, the main thing that they're abusing is squads, and mainly in air battles, because of the fact that it doesn't match up other people together. So yeah, those were the 2 things that I would put in. It solves the issue straight away. It's a simple solution. You don't have to go anything crazy. You don't even have to change the vast majority of the way that people play, and it's an easy solution for everybody. The easiest solution is always the best, and this, since it just uses a pre-existing mechanic we already have in the game, would easily do it. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank GMG Smiley, CD Beans, Chieftain Mike, EMN3 Galaxy, Tulio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Ozzy Panzer, Alan Hacker, Liam Shear, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Sem, Aslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.